Hello, and welcome to Learn English Through Stories. Today's story is called The Bridge Builder. This is an upper intermediate to advanced story, suitable for B2 to C1 learners. Before we begin, let's review 5 key words. First word, to be separated. To be separated means to be kept apart. Two things or two groups are separated when there is something between them, a wall, a river, a distance. In this story, two villages are separated by a river. Second word, foolish. Foolish means unwise, silly, or lacking good judgment. If someone does something that other people think is a bad idea, they might call that person foolish. But sometimes, what appears foolish turns out to be wise. Third word, to connect. To connect means to join two things together. A bridge connects two sides of a river. A road connects two towns. A phone call connects two people. In this story, one man wants to connect two villages. Fourth word, determination. Determination is the quality of continuing to try something even when it is very difficult. A person with determination does not give up. They keep working toward their goal, no matter what obstacles they face. Fifth word, legacy. A legacy is something that a person leaves behind after they die, not money or things, but something more lasting. A legacy can be an idea, a building, a change in the world. It is the mark a person leaves on the world, and it can last for generations. Listen once more. To be separated, foolish. To connect, determination, legacy. Now, listen to the story. In a remote valley, between two ranges of mountains, there ran a river. It was not the longest river in the country, and it was not the deepest, but it was wide and fast and dangerous, especially in the spring when the snow melted in the mountains and the water rose and roared and carried trees and rocks downstream as if they were toys. On the eastern side of the river stood the village of East Haven. On the western side stood the village of Westford. The two villages had been separated by the river for as long as anyone could remember, for 100 years perhaps, or maybe more. They had once been a single community, or so the old story said, but the river had grown wider and faster over the years, and the rope bridge that had once connected them had been washed away in a great flood, and it had never been replaced. The result was what you might expect. Over the years, the two villages had grown apart. They had their own markets, their own schools, their own traditions. They spoke the same language, but with different accents. They celebrated the same holidays, but on different days. When a young man from East Haven fell in love with a young woman from Westford, which happened from time to time, as it does in all stories, they had no choice but to leave both villages and build a life somewhere else, because there was no way to live in one village and belong to the other. The only way across the river was by boat, and the boats were small and unreliable, and the river was dangerous, especially in the spring and autumn. Once or twice a decade, someone would drown trying to cross. The last drowning had been 3 years ago, a young woman from Westford, trying to reach East Haven to see her dying father. She had not made it. The river had taken her, as it had taken others before. It was after that drowning, the young woman, the father she never reached, that a man named Elias decided he had had enough. Elias was a carpenter in East Haven. He was not a young man. He was 45 when he made his decision, with gray already appearing in his beard and a permanent ache in his back from years of lifting heavy wood. He was quiet, well-respected, but not wealthy. He lived alone, his wife having died years earlier, and he had no children. He was the kind of man who said little but meant everything he said. "I am going to build a bridge," he announced one evening at the village meeting. The room went silent. Then, slowly, people began to laugh, not cruelly, but with the kind of amused disbelief that is worse than cruelty, because it dismisses without even considering. a bridge across that river? The river was 100 meters wide at its narrowest point, and the water ran deep and fast, and the banks were steep and rocky. It would take stone and wood and iron and money and years of labor. It would take engineers and architects and resources that a small village simply did not have. "You are a carpenter, Elias, not an engineer," said the village elder, a man named Robert, who was kind but practical. "A bridge is not a table. You cannot build it with a hammer and some nails." "I will build it," Elias said. And he said nothing more, because Elias was not a man who argued. He simply acted. He began the next day. He walked to the river, studied the banks, and marked the narrowest point with 2 wooden posts. Then he started gathering materials: stone from the quarry, wood from the forest, iron from the old fences and gates that people had thrown away. He worked alone, at first, carrying stones on his back, cutting timber with his axe, digging foundations in the rocky soil along the riverbank. The people of East Haven watched. Some were curious. Some were amused. Some thought he was foolish. A few, a very few, thought he was doing something extraordinary. But no one helped, not at first. It was too strange, too ambitious, too clearly impossible. They did not want to be associated with a project that would certainly fail. Elias did not ask for help. He simply worked. Every morning, before the sun was up, he was at the river. Every evening, after the sun went down, he was still there. He built the first support, a stone pillar that rose from the water on the eastern side of the river. It took him a year. 1 pillar. A year of carrying stones, mixing cement, working in the cold water, fighting the current, risking his life every day. When the first pillar was finished, something changed. People began to come and watch, not with amusement anymore, but with a kind of quiet wonder. A woman from East Haven brought him food one day and said, "I cannot build, but I can cook." A young man who had just finished school came and said, "I am strong. I can carry stones." Slowly, one by one, others joined. Elias taught them what he had taught himself. He had spent months reading books about bridge construction, books he had ordered from the city, books that had taken weeks to arrive, books that were written in technical language he had to decipher word by word. He had made mistakes. The first pillar had collapsed twice before it held. But he had learned from every failure, and now he was teaching others what he had learned. On the other side of the river, in Westford, people had been watching too. At first, they had been suspicious. What was the man from East Haven doing? Was he building some kind of fortification? A wall? A dam? But when they realized he was building a bridge that would connect them to East Haven, something shifted. An old woman in Westford said, "My grandmother used to tell me stories about the old rope bridge. She said the 2 villages were one, before the river took the bridge away. Maybe this man is trying to bring us back together." And so, one day, a small group from Westford crossed the river by boat, at great risk, and came to East Haven to meet Elias. They offered to help. They brought stone from their quarry, wood from their forest, labor from their hands. Elias welcomed them without hesitation. "A bridge has 2 sides," he said. "Both sides must build it." The work continued. It was slow, brutal, and often dangerous. The river did not cooperate. It flooded twice during the construction, destroying months of work each time. 2 workers were injured badly enough that they could not continue. Elias himself nearly died when a rope snapped and he fell into the river. He was pulled out by a young man from Westford, the son of the woman who had told the story about the old rope bridge. Years passed, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. Elias grew old. His hair, which had been dark brown when he started, was now white. His hands were thick with calluses and scarred from stone and iron. He could not carry the heaviest stones anymore, but he could direct, could plan, could teach. The younger workers, and there were many now, from both villages, looked to him as their leader, their inspiration, their father. The bridge took 15 years to build. 15 years of stone and wood and iron and sweat and blood and determination. When it was finally finished, it was not the most beautiful bridge in the world. It was not the longest or the tallest, but it was strong. It was solid. It spanned the river at its narrowest point, and it connected East Haven and Westford for the first time in 100 years. The day the bridge was opened, there was a ceremony. People from both villages came. They walked across the bridge, East Haven people walking west, Westford people walking east, and they met in the middle. There was music, and food, and speeches. Elias was asked to speak. He was 60 years old now, and thin and tired. He walked slowly to the center of the bridge with the help of 2 young men, and he looked at the crowd on both sides. He did not say much. He was not a man of many words. He said, "I wanted to build a bridge. The river was wide, the work was hard. But the river is still wide, and the work is done, and here we are. That is all." The people cheered. They cheered not because the speech was great, but because the man was great, and the bridge was great, and the moment was great. But Elias did not have long to enjoy what he had built. He had given 15 years of his life to the bridge, and his body had given everything it had. 3 months after the bridge was opened, Elias fell ill. He died quietly in his bed, with the sound of the river in the distance and the sound of footsteps on the bridge, people walking across it, freely, safely, for the first time in a century. They buried him on a hill overlooking the river, where he could see the bridge forever. They put up a simple stone marker with his name and the words, "He connected what was separated." In the years that followed, the 2 villages did what Elias had hoped. They began to merge. First the markets combined, then the schools. Children from both villages grew up together, playing on the bridge, crossing without fear, never knowing the isolation their parents and grandparents had endured. Families formed across the river. The accents began to sound the same. The holidays began to be celebrated on the same days. And the bridge, they called it Elias's Bridge, stood for 100 years. When it finally needed repair, the great-great-grandchildren of the people who had built it came together, just as their ancestors had, and they fixed it. And when people asked why they bothered, why they didn't just build a modern bridge, they said, "Because it is Elias's bridge, because he built it, because it is our legacy." Now, let's check your understanding. 5 questions. Pause after each one and try to answer. Question 1. How long had the 2 villages been separated, and what had caused the separation? Question 2. How did the people of East Haven react when Elias first announced his plan, and why? Question 3. What changed the attitude of the people, and when did they start helping? Question 4. How long did the bridge take to build, and what was the cost to Elias personally? Question 5. What is the legacy that Elias left behind, and how did it affect future generations? Thank you for listening to Learn English Through Stories. I hope the bridge builder inspired you. Sometimes, the most determined people are the ones who seem the most foolish at first. If you enjoyed this story, share it with someone who is building something, a bridge, a dream, a life. See you in the next story. Goodbye.